quickly, I lead the digital business unit for Data Capital, and I also head the brand marketing and corporate communication portfolio. I'm just going to request all my co-panelists to give a very brief introduction of themselves, and then we'll straight away dive in.
Good evening, everyone. Myself, Kunal Karkhanis, who is heading the digital banking at Saraswat Bank. So it is all more about the innovation, technology, new things, new innovation, process engineering. That is everything is headed by me. So, thanks.
Hi everyone, I am Ankur Singla. I am the founder and CEO of OneDirect and of Tabzo.
Hi, I'm Loveleen. I head brand, digital and social for Aditya Birla Capital. The brand got launched on 1st of November, but before that we were 13 lines of businesses with 8 different logos. You may have known us as Birla Sun Life and so on and so forth.
Super. So I think if there's one thing that's probably shaken and stirred every nook and corner of the financial sector, it's technology. It's changed just about everything and anything in the way we run our businesses. And one big area of impact, of course, is the entire customer journey and customer experiences. And there was a very interesting report that I was reading, which is by the Financial Brand. And it talks about the trends and predictions of the retail banking industry. And very, very evidently, about 71% of the institutions have actually said in that report that customer journey and experience is the most strategic area of focus for them, which is great. But if you delve a little deeper into the report, what starts happening is that the layers start coming out. And what one realizes is that a lot of customer experience initiatives are actually underfunded, poorly measured, often misdirected or unsupported. And what one sees in that report is that while 71% of the organizations believe that it's a huge area of focus, only 1/3 actually have some sort of a plan for it. And whatever initiatives are there are also actually taken more in the name of cost saving and less in the name of customer benefits. So clearly, while this is a massive area where a strategic competitive advantage can be built, it's of course not that simple. And hopefully over the next 30 minutes, we'll try and peel it and try and share whatever minuscule level of knowledge we all have in this crazy, fast evolving world. So I'm going to begin with you, Ankur. And my question is, when did this whole paraphernalia and this whole phenomenal change that we are seeing in customer experience actually begin in the BFSI sector?
So, we've been meeting BFSI clients for almost 2.5 years now. I think we saw a major shift happening about a year ago. In the last 1 year, what we've seen is it has gone from paying lip service to customer experience to actually caring about it at a much higher level. You're right that it's not there yet. And in my mind, I think the biggest reason has been the rise of consumer tech. And I think banks were caught, BFSI as a sector as a whole was caught a little unaware, or they were a little complacent, because I think this is the first time such hardcore changes happening in their industry in the last 15-20 years. And I think one of the evidence that became clear was when a lot of their own employees were using apps of these consumer tech companies, and then it becomes hard after a point. In fact, they themselves were using apps of these companies thanks to Uber and so on. I think that's when a change started happening. But now we are seeing a real intent towards improving consumer experience.
Kunal, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the innovation sector for the BFSI, actually it is not a new story. So the product innovation was something which was for years happening at the BFSI. But the technology innovation has taken up for last 2 years. And the technology innovation in BFSI is the most challenging. As he said, the BFSI sector is complacent about that. But the main challenging is, since BFSI is a very highly regulated industry. So any innovation should be within the premises, within the borders defined by the regulators. That's the main challenge. The second aspect of BFSI is always any innovation, the first thing the management would ask, what is the ROI? So that meeting an ROI is the second most challenge, because look, innovations is such a thing, we start a project, by its go production moment, it becomes obsolete. So that is the change which is happening in the BFSI. So yes, definitely the pace is slow, but today I think the customer trust is something which is driving the BFSI. The customer behavior is changing, and that is something which we need to keep the pace with the fintechs and everything.
Very nice. You've done a very good job of introducing what I wanted to ask next, and that's to you and you. So when we look at this customer innovation that's happening, is it happening more from inside out, or are you actually seeing it happening from outside in? And is it more being driven by the incumbents, or is the fintech somewhere driving this? And most importantly, who's sitting in the driver's seat? Is it technology experts, or is it actually the customer?
So first, I think I want to just kind of open the word customer experience a little, because I don't think it's just limited to tech, although we understand it through the filter of tech. So if you see the big change I think that's happened in the financial services sector is that broadly the markets have opened in a very big way. The way we lead our lives today, money has become of tremendous value, right? And we are working 18 hours, 20 hours. We have diverse experiences. And therefore, for the first time in the last 8-10 years, there's a very palpable need of the middle class and the upper middle class to participate with their money, right? And therefore, when you talk about experience with regard to financial services, I think it starts from language up, right? So we are used to advisors peddling products, multiple products, which people don't understand, whether it's life insurance or it's mutual funds. And he mentioned a very interesting word, regulator. So we hide behind regulations. And we have these very, very complicated terms and conditions. So I think till the time we don't address that experience, any amount of technological intervention is useless because the consumers or people are very afraid of our sector. That's number one. So if we have to bring any change in consumer experience, we have to first understand outside in where the people are facing a hurdle and why they're not participating. So if you look at mutual funds in our country, for example, we have a 4% penetration. If you look at Brazil, which is an equal economy, it's a 35% penetration. If you look at Europe, it's a 65% penetration. So we are highly, highly underpenetrated when we participate with our own money. Having said that, even if you understood the outside problem, the inside out becomes really, really important because again, we are a very, very regulated industry. But today, customer consent is very easy, right? Because we are deeply digital. But the entire financial services business is built in silos because of the regulator, right? So we are not approaching the customer as one for his money. We are approaching him in silos. Until the time we don't address that fundamentally as a process inside, whatever insight we may have of outside in, we won't be able to correct that. So I think to have industry leadership and a will to change processes and bring in a new way of working, which of course includes technology, okay, because technology is a big incubator. But if you don't have that vision inside and if you don't want to reinvent the entire industry, the outside in knowledge won't help. So I think we are a very, very unique industry where outside in is as important as inside out.
So I'll take your question. So in terms of innovation, as you asked, whether the innovation is inside out or it's in outside in, I'll tell you, in a BFSI sector, the innovations till last couple of years, it was always inside out. Always the management used to be in the driver's seat and find out, boss, we need to come out with this product, this has to be the process, this should be the top line, this should be the bottom line, everything was there. But today, since last 2 years, the entire dynamics has changed. Now it is more from a customer driven. What customer requires, that's more important. So every focus has now changed from a business centric to a customer centric. Today, the top line and bottom line is something which is definitely going to matter, but it is on the second priority. Now, the first thing is the customer engagement, retaining customers, and continuing the relation with the customer. That's more important from the BFSI. So it is more, the innovation is more from keeping the customer in centric. Yes, if the customer requires this, we need to come out with this product, we need to come out with twist our process, we need to come out with some certain things. So now it is more from a outside in, which is like we say as a customer experience is more important for us.
Should I add one point? So when we say innovation and which is an open innovation, nowadays the way we are operating, innovation is required both sides, inside as well as outside. For example, let's take example operations team, like having a 4 or 5 member of team who are doing repetitive kind of task every day. Or we have something which is a data center, repetitive task which they are doing every day. There could be many more scenarios where the innovation is required or automation is required, which is an inside story. And when you say outside, which is the customer, as he rightly said, the customer demand is nowadays increasing. Like you and me and everywhere, like we want everything as of now, and everywhere, and all the channels. The way we were operating, we were having like ATM or branches or call center, mobile. Now those channels has increased to the social media, or wherever we go, we want the service to be, has to be there. So innovation requirement is everywhere. As far as a bank or a BFS sector, we need innovation inside as well as outside.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to repeat the last part of the question. The question was that who is sitting in the driver's seat? Do you see the CIOs and the technology experts driving this innovation more? Or do you really see the CMOs and the chief customer officers driving this innovation?
I think it's everywhere. It's not only CIOs, because it's in all the areas. Rather, I would say there are new situations or positions are getting created within an organization. Take example, before 10 years, we were not having a role kind of a CDO or something kind of like a chief innovation officer or something, or even marketing was not at all kind of a specialized. But the way demand is increasing, we are understanding that specialized areas are required, right? Like for example, today I do not have a blockchain kind of expertise. Tomorrow I may be having a chief blockchain officer, something like that. It all depends upon the need. And right now need is so much increasing, so we want a specialized unit for the innovation to do. And as you rightly said, if you really want to drive, it has to be top down. For example, you need to create awareness around that board members team. They should know what is meant by blockchain or what is meant by AI, so that they can bring on that kind of investment to the ongoing various projects or various threads. At the same time, you have to involve all your employees also within an organization. Like take example, the banks, the way they were operating. Now there could be various types of banks. Take example of newest bank like IDFC Bandhan, or take example of SBI, which is operating the way they were operating, or cooperative banks, or bank like DCB or Saraswat. So now there also we need to see, if you want to bring on the innovation from every thread, you need to involve your teams or employees also. They can also come out with some good ideas or the innovation in their areas. So I would say it's a collaboration kind of a situation is there, wherein we need to go out with every unit or every stakeholders to come out with the actual innovation. So
but you know, the thing is that it's such a complicated category. And because the regulator controls it so tightly and the products are so undifferentiated, and we are talking about people's money at the end of the day, I feel this is one very unique category where the consumer for a very long time will not be in the driver's seat, unfortunately, right? So if you look at, for example, Paytm, which is a very, very interesting case, and it will almost make you believe that the consumer is in the driving seat. The truth is it's a transaction app, right? You're at the end of the day just putting 3,000, 5,000 bucks in it, right? And you're using it on a daily basis. So trust is not such an important factor there, because what you're going to lose out is such a small amount. But when you really talk about financial services, and I want to go beyond banks here, right? You are really talking about people's hard-earned money. So the incumbents definitely have an advantage, because that's where trust sits. And that's the first thing, which is the reason why the public sector banks still exist, despite maybe poor user experience, right? So because trust is such a huge factor, over and above that you have to build technology. Unfortunately, and I use that word very carefully, it will have to be the leadership within an organization that will have to drive the change. The consumer can feel frustrated. At best, he won't participate in your industry, and your industry won't grow at an exponential rate, which it should be growing at. But unfortunately, in this case, the change has to be driven from within.
Super.
Like I said, we've been talking to banks. I think there are two larger narratives. One is what we just heard, which is that banks and older companies have the trust. The other narrative is essentially that the consumer today is actually very young. These are people who've been born and pretty much brought up on mobile, internet, and so on. And this is a guy who's going to the likes of Paytm or other apps on a regular basis. And the frequency of that interaction is building a different kind of trust, which at some point will lead to them also being able to do banking and financial things. And the nature of that will be fundamentally different. So for example, Again, I don't know if they've launched, but we heard that they're in the process of launching. So Paytm was launching a 99 rupee chikungunya insurance with DHFL Primerica. Now that's a product which has never been seen before in India because of high amount of distribution. They're able to do something like that at 99 rupees. Now, I don't think anybody knows what is going to happen in the future, whether this narrative will win or this narrative will win. I think everybody we've met, especially chief digital officers, are basically, it's like Pascal's bet, where they say, what if this is true? We have to be prepared for this. But what if this is true? Great, but we would have anyway improved ourselves. That is what we are seeing today. My hunch is, in the next 1 year, we will probably have an answer whether which of these two might pan out more.
But the thing is that a year and a half ago, maybe a little more, you could, Paytm started the KYC, and now you can actually technically do your eKYC and deposit more than 50,000 rupees, I think a lakh in Paytm. I don't know if even there's a fraction of a 1% population that does that. So while the customer frustration is very apparent, and I think BFSI is only, I think there is change everywhere.
So I asked somebody that, and we had again 2-3 different views. The reason is that there is no USP or any benefit in me storing money with Paytm, right? That I do with ICICI. Just hear me out. That I do with ICICI. Sorry, we're just, but I'm just giving you a counter view. Essentially, what we are saying is that products like lending, where people do need money and you need to do it at scale with new credit models, or products like insurance, which again have been very limited, or even products like mutual funds, which is essentially anyway eating into the pie of saving bank accounts, etc., is where they might happen. But like I said, see, we come from the tech world, and for us, this is what everything is about.
You're absolutely
so we could
right,
be totally wrong about it.
See, the truth is, and which is I don't want to just jump, because tech is enabling so much, and the first instinct is, oh, let's do what Walnut is doing, or let's do what Paytm is doing, and so on and so forth, because there's so many exciting products out there. But at the end of the day, when you are doing a SIP, which is online, what you want to really understand is the performance of a fund, right? And in order to get the safest or the best performing fund, because it's your money, unfortunately, again, I'm using that word, you don't mind going through the inconvenience because it's your money, right?
Sure. I think the question is, how long will the customer go for the inconvenience to get a better return? Because soon there will be an option which gives a better return and is equally convenient.
Yes.
So
and who drives that is the question.
Absolutely. And I think you're extremely optimistic if you think this is going to get solved in the next 12 months. It's going to take much longer than that. And now I'm going to push a bank panelists, because clearly, as you can make out, there's a divide. So the question to the two of you is that when you look at the role of the regulator in building and driving this customer experience innovation in the BFSI sector, how much of a role do you think the regulator is playing in the positive, and how much of a role do you think the regulator, or where is it acting as a trigger and where is it acting as a barrier?
Okay, so it's a very good question. If you ask all the audience, who is the greatest startup in India? Who is the biggest startup in India? If anybody can answer, then I can answer your question.
Let's ask
the question
audience.
is like, who is the greatest startup in India?
Some wild guesses?
Any guesses? We talk a lot about fintech, startups and everything. If anybody of you can answer or give their opinions, who is the greatest startup in India? Or the biggest? There are so many names, right? So in my view, the greatest startup in India is the government of India and the regulator. The way they are operating in the disruptive way in the last 2-3 years, demonetization, you talk about UPI, or you talk about taking all the Aadhaar into mainstream, there are a lot of things that are happening. It's all because of the regulation. They have drafted, you can support me, right? They are coming with the cyber security, or you can say the whole path of the regulatory RBI, all the vision statement, which was drafted in 2013. As on 2017, whatever they had said in a vision statement, everything is being executed on time. You talk about startup fintech, they keep on going here in the timelines, right? So we are blessed with a very good regulator. And I would say on time for considering the Digital India event or all these events which has been come after PMJDY, everything is on execution. Absolutely is going good, and most of the Indians are getting benefited out of it. There could be some challenges like infrastructure or network is not there, internet is not there, adoption is not there. But this is a journey. And as a journey, I would always say, and we are part of blessed country, and the way the regulator is here in India, it's amazing. Maybe you can second.
Absolutely. So, as Prasanna said, ki you case take the case of a demonetization. Who was the biggest sufferer? Whether it was a common man or whether it was a banker. Obviously the banker, because they used to work some 16, 18 hours per day. But today you ask any banker whether a demonetization was a successful or not successful. Everyone would say it was a successful exercise. Because although everything was done abruptly, everything, but still it is in place. Today, take an example of GST. The rollout of GST was something, no one was very sure whether it will be rolled out in a better manner. Okay, there are certain hiccups going on, but believe me, it will be streamlined. In fact, in the demonetization, the fintechs like this, my co-panelists, they have really helped the economy to grow. Because it is not only the banks. Look, today, if you ask me who is the biggest competitor of bank, I would say cash. It is not the bank or it is not the fintech. The cash is the biggest competitor. Because holding cash, keeping the cash in circulation is really a cost. I would be happy more than if my 50% customers go digitally, totally digitally. So that is where we find out. And definitely we would like to work with fintechs also, because as Prasanna said, innovations cannot be done solely by the bank. It is the fintechs who comes together because they have the ideas, we have the data. They have the innovation, we have the technology. So it is a collaborative effort, and definitely this is going to change the innovation space henceforth.
Super. I'm going to bring you in back, Lavleen. And the question here is that when we look at the technology stir that the sector is seeing, or if you were to see the rapid changes in CX that the sector is seeing, are you seeing the world of branding in the financial services change in this context?
Why just financial services? So I come from financial services is last 4.5 years. I think the world of branding has changed, period, right? It's far more challenging, and that's very mildly put today. So as a marketer, you cannot fake experiences any longer. I remember when we were growing up in brand and marketing, we would have experience centers. You know, let's set up this experience center, or let's do this on-ground activity for this experience. So that's so archaic today. Because experience is what the consumer goes through when he's interacting with your product, your category, right? So for the first time, actually, marketing can find itself very, very helpless if the product doesn't perform. And when I say product, I don't mean the end product. I mean from discovery all the way to servicing the product through the life cycle. What I think marketing is learning very fast to do in the last 2.5, 3 years is understanding where is detraction and where is advocacy, very quickly to learn from that, go back to the cycle of improvement, and take your advocacy and use that to further the cause of the brand, right? So today, whether you're engaging with the product offline or online, you will go online to see what the customer views are, ratings are, et cetera, et cetera. But beyond that, if you're not working very closely, to use your words, outside in, to engage with development of the product and then building a brand through that, you will fail as a marketer today. It's no longer a marketing campaign. Those are years gone forever.
Ankur, you want to add to that?
No, I completely agree. Sorry. Yeah, I completely agree with what she's saying. In fact, we've also seen this change. We did a marketing campaign for our other business earlier this year, and actually the kind of expectation we have now from marketing side and the customer's understanding of the product, it is very, very different than what it was maybe even 5 years ago.
And rightly so. I think, and my background is customer strategy as well. So I must quote Professor Kotler here. We were having an evening dinner with him, and I remember him telling me that if this is the age of the customer, then who better to rule it than people who are closest to customer, and of course marketing people. little bit of bias there since he's a marketing professor himself, but I thought it was extremely relevant. I'm going to bring the technology experts back in. When we are looking at building for innovation and building for agility, what kind of a typical IT architecture should one go in for?
Okay, so you should have to have latest technologies, and more importantly, you should have an something like framework which ties up all your primary financial systems, which can be leveraged to do the innovation. To implement that, for example, you can have a enterprise service bus, which is a backbone for all the communication of all the payments, core banking, and all those systems. On top of that, you should have a kind of a gateway or API, which will expose your services to the external community, like startup fintech, to work on those APIs. Take example, customer onboarding. If you have a kind of a customer onboarding API supported by, take example, India Stack API, eKYC, followed by PAN, or maybe payment APIs, straight through, you can really build a logic to open up a fixed deposit. So that the way we were having the opening of the fixed deposit in traditional way, please 7 to 15 days, it could be in a few minutes based upon the speed of the customer. So in a nutshell, we should have a robust architecture, and that too, and supported by the enterprise service bus, having those APIs on top of the API management, and quite openly exposed to the external world. Now here also you can have a various divisions. Some of the you should have a sandbox kind of thing, which is an test environment for those APIs. It should be available openly to the external startup and fintechs. So in Indian scenario, take example DCB Bank. Now, and I take example in a fintech who want to do an experimentation along with a bank and insurance and some IoT device. So how do I provide that kind of environment? Right? I need to really tie up with another insurance agency to take out their APIs or some IoT devices and my banking APIs. That kind of a sandbox is not available in India. Say example, Singapore or some other countries where that kind of a standardization is there, where they have those kind of sandboxes, or we call it as a regulatory sandboxes. So in India's perspective, although we have NPCI with UPI sandbox, which they are creating now, or we have e-sign plus all these eKYC, those kind of India Stack APIs. But there is no single entity who will govern these NPCIs API, my bank APIs, and Aadhaar API. So that for you being a fintech or for you being a fintech, it becomes very easy to come there, do the experimentation, get a success or a failure out of that whole experimentation. So this kind of a thing is not there. I think some work is happening, having those fintech forums, having that, all the things are happening, but still yet to do, lot to do on that. And even if I decided tomorrow, let's be spearhead that kind of, I'll not be able to do, unless collaboration, as you said, collaboration of all these entities to have at least all those 700, 800 APIs, so that the startup fintech community today struggle with this kind of alignment with all the banks. Although some of the banks are very superior to give that kind of environment, having those ready-made sandboxes. But take example, some of those banks, they really do not understand what is meant by the ESB, what is the need of that. And the way they are architectured, it becomes very easy for those new banks to really build on those architecture. Take example, a DC Bank having a legacy of 84-year-old, after understanding of core banking 10 or somewhere around 20 years before we built in, on that too, which core banking I have, what is that my path? So it's a combination. Like any new bank like NSBI building on that kind of API with all muscle power, at times it becomes easy, difficult. But it depends on bank to bank. But at the nutshell, we need to have this kind of an environment, sandbox or the APIs as an architecture. It should be path within the journey of the architecture development, and as well as keeping eye on what is the latest trend on those APIs. It could be tomorrow microservices, it could be anything else. So that kind of architecture is very much required, or adoption of the cloud, and so on.
So before you answer it, I'm going to add another dimension to the question. So clearly you spoke a lot about open architecture, plug-and-play architecture. The word, of course, which is very popular these days is ecosystems. So would you want to, maybe take your pick on what do you believe is going to be the one of the biggest ecosystems that you see entering the financial sector, which involves, let's say, a financial services player and a non-financial services player. So if you could just comment on how you see the ecosystems developing in the BFSI sector, using both financial and non-financial players, and of course, hopefully keeping the customer at the center.
So it is more of a collaborative thing. The bank as well as the non-bank are coming together. Take an example of UPI. So UPI is not a product which is floated by bank. There are non-banks products. In fact, the regulator, NPCI's product, which is doing tremendous success in this UPI segment. So it is more of a collaborative thing. In terms of architecture, as Prasanna mentioned, there has to be ESB layer, over and above, there has to be API stack. So what this architecture is, so there could be different models of deployment, everything. But there are three success things. That is, first is the scalability, second is the performance, and third is the security. If all these three are scattered by any of the technology, then definitely that technology stands good. So it may happen that the bank may go for ESB, a bank may go for API stack, but today, if these three objectives, the three main principles are added by any of the technology, that is a good technology. Going ahead, as you mentioned, the collaborative thing. So today, we strongly believe there are two things which is going to change the entire dynamics of the ecosystem. One is the API and second is the UPI. So what we feel that this is going to change entire dynamics for the ecosystem of more collaborative rather than more of a competitive thing.
So I'm going to add a third one since it's almost rhyming with API and UPI. I think a third dimension really needed in this country is PPI, which is the purchasing power parity. Ankur, I'm going to ask you the same question. Where would you see the biggest challenge for BFSI players coming from outside when it comes to developing powerful ecosystems for the customer?
I think it's, again, what she mentioned earlier is essentially that everything in banks is still running in silos. And for them to really put customer at the center and then build a true ecosystem for the customer by having a lot of these API integrations, et cetera, at the back end, I think that still remains a challenge. I think a lot of banks have created the chief digital officer post, but there is still some distance that even CDOs have to cover to convince both the senior management as well as the tech side. So to give you an example of what he was mentioning, we've spoken to close to 25 banks. Out of 25 banks, let's say the CDO says it is now a customer expectation that I should be able to open a bank account on the mobile app. Now, out of 25 banks, close to about 18 banks were on Finacle version 7.0, which is probably, so many years ago, that they're saying first it will take us a year to even update to the latest Finacle, and then we can talk about something like that. So I think there's a lot of, a reasonable amount of way to go on that side. But I think that CDO role needs to be given enough importance and cachet within the organization to be able to drive all of this.
So this is what I was telling. It depends on bank to bank and available infrastructure. Yeah. We may always say, let's go with the latest technology or latest Finacle and core banking, but timeline really matters. And speed to market, what is there needed. This is why having the right kind of architecture is very much required. And those phases, like in phase 1, I can really go ahead with the API management provided I do not have ESB, or followed by the ESB, then followed by, it could be, it all depends upon bank to bank. So I think this was a really practical situation. Some of the banks are really with the old Finacle, and they really, at times they do not have that thought process, how do we go ahead?
So the only hope is this time when they think, they have to think for the next 5, 10 years.
How to go ahead? Like whether should I first of all migrate into the next one, or should I wait for ESB to go live, or should I first of all, because other banks also raise, should I build on the API? So having that right people and right skill set, like at times I do not have, for example, to build on good architect at a bank level or support from an external agency is very much required.
And I've seen a lot of people being very frustrated with the quality of support they get as well. So I won't name the bank, but they were so...
You don't have to name the bank, but let's look at the solution. The solution is having that sandbox. You can agree with me.
So just to ensure it doesn't get too technical and we also keep time, I'm going to pull in another aspect of experience, which is data. Now, clearly data is an enabler when it comes to innovation or customer experience. How well prepared do you think the incumbents are? I'll start with Loveleen.
Okay, so I want to link actually the previous question to this, because I think the incumbents sit on tremendous amount of data, and analytics is a word which is thrown very loosely around. and it's been part of more customer service and upsell and cross-sell terms, which are so, these are navel-gazing terms, right? They don't keep the customer at the center of anything. But if I were to answer your previous question and link it to that, competition actually for us, and therefore how we use data, is, I think we need a status quo challenger. So let me give you an example. If tomorrow or today, TripAdvisor started offering travel insurance, right, which means very, very deeply linked with their core business, but actually a product that is not core to them, right? I see a lot of TripAdvisor users buying that insurance. It's not in their space, right? But they own travel and they understand data, right? The point I'm trying to make is the way BFSI or financial services approaches data. It keeps it very close to its chest, right? That data is not used for often customer benefit. It's used for their upsell and cross-sell benefit. When that data is open to predictive offering, what you can call the next best offer, which suits the customer's lifestyle and not your business projections, is when the industry will really start benefiting. And that will happen when you cross-pollinate with other industries, which means you understand what is the customer's life, what is his life stage, what are the other data points, which today digital and social allows you to have access to, and how are you taking your data and marrying with that. Only once you do that, will you actually, for example, move mutual fund from this language of equity debt to my next big holiday, right? And I think that cross-pollination of data is what's useful, not analytics in BFSI today the way it's used.
No, absolutely. And I remember I was in a conference with the founder of Investopedia, and basis the search words that consumers put in on Investopedia, they have developed an index which they then use to connect to Sensex movements in their context, and what they found was a correlation of 0.7. And what they're now working on seeing is that depending on the terms that people are putting on Investopedia, can they actually predict where the stock market would go? So that's berserk cross-pollination, and they would probably almost be acting like the best investment advisor. I'm going to bring in another topic here, which is the Internet of Things and wearables. Do we see a future for wearables in the financial sector?
So, we've had a very bizarre year and a half. Okay, I think one of our LOBs launched some 11 apps, okay, under the assumption that wearables is the next big thing. We've all bought Fitbits and thrown them away, right? I have 2 smartwatches, I don't wear either, right? So I think to begin with, wearables is a big question, right? Because I don't think that market has been cracked per se. But it's a very, very, very interesting market, right? Having said that, I think within financial services, there are some things you want to keep track of and the other things you don't want to keep track of. So for example, if you've taken insurance, it's a fill it, shut it, forget it kind of a product, right? So it's not a everyday update kind of a product, right? But if you have, for example, invested, you want to know your NAV on a daily basis. So I think we are going a little overboard with regard to technology and the role it can play for us versus some of the other categories. It has tremendous convenience and simplicity it can provide in a highly complex, complicated and regulated industry. But I think wearables minus things like health insurance, right, where you can get rewarded for good health and therefore you want to monitor your health. In some of those spaces, they can be interesting, but I'm very skeptical, I'm very skeptical about wearables as of now.
Okay.
Okay, so in 2017, we are living in an era where we have 7 different type of generations. So every generation has its own demand and wish. Take example of my son. He don't like using phones for typing. He can directly take out the phone and ask Siri, please take to me this. So it's a way to look at the take example of my father would not like to use a mobile phone actually for doing transaction. He would love to go to the branch and talk to that guy, have a chit chat and come back. That's how it is. So we were operating in an era like we were very happy with the personal computers. I had bought a personal computer, I was happy. I was like 1 year, I was looking at only that PC. Then I got a laptop. I was so happy. That time I never thought of having my smartphone and something like it would be, right? So that's the way our generations are growing. So after 3-4 years, we will see era of IoTs. Devices talking with the devices. Refrigerator ordering its own on its own based upon the way we are programmed. Connected cars ordering everything or doing the payment experience. So it's a demand, right? And the way need of the IoTs and the banking, it all depends on the type of customer. Take example of agri customers. We are building some of the use cases for the agri customers. Like for example, on lending based upon the weather availability or the soil situation, it all through the IoT we are capturing these details. Or let's say tracking of the vehicles, how they are operating the vehicles or tractors for whom we are given the loans. Are they operating in the same area or somebody has given a loan in Punjab and he's operating to Uttar Pradesh? How can I really track it? I can track it through IoTs or those signals. So IoT is really going to be a booster for all the services. So we are today in a generation of the mobiles and sooner or later, we never know we will get into that. And it's up to wish, like wearables, we have seen rise of wearables, we have seen an amazing, like we use, right? Many people started using it. So it's up to individual, like how do we get, and we have different types of customers. And as era continues, certainly we will see the IoT will bring on lots of use cases around that. And at the same time, we are concerned about the security around IoTs. And people say IoT devices are not that secure. But the way journey continues, we will also make it very secure. Coming back to your last question, which you asked about the data. So banks now have started understanding. We are sitting, almost all the banks are sitting on all the data of the Indians, whoever is bank customer. Let's ignore as of now Google. Google is sitting on all the customers. So banks are understanding, and take example of DC Bank, we have started that journey. Although analytics was always a part of integral part of a reporting and so on. So playing around the data to bring on the profiling of a particular customer, so that apart from cross-selling, actually, as she rightly said, offer the predictive analysis coming to the customer's life, he becomes loyal to you. So it's really, the bank, whoever is going to use that data properly will be at a mainstream. Or countries who are going to use their data properly, they will be at a mainstream.
Sure. I'm going to open the floor for questions now. I'm taking cognizance of the time here. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I'll take since the question was variables for BFSI. So variables actually has lost the pace of in the BFSI sector for individual. But I'll give a very strong use case, a fantastic use case for variables, I'll tell you. So everyone in the banking, typically take a bank or an ATM, there is a security guard. Overnight he's sitting over there. And we never know what the guy is doing, whether he's sitting in front of the ATM, whether he's guarding, whether he's sleeping, anything. A security agency is developing a use case with the help of Fitbit. So he'll be providing each Fitbit to each security guard. So each security guard will be having the Fitbit, and every 30 minutes, he'll get a notification on the Fitbit. Ki, boss, are you awake? So that makes him he cannot sleep for the day. Secondly, they are creating geo mapping sort of thing through the variables, wherein his movement will track. Suppose he's stationed at one of the ATM in Goregaon, so his movement will be within that 500 meters of the ATM. So that is something, some use cases are being developed on the variables also. So not for a retail customer, but take an example for security agencies or any of the thing, the variables is going to change a big dynamics for them.
So to go back to the floor, if there are any questions. Okay. We have one question there.
Hi, Abhishek this side. One question. Is it that the data privacy and sort of Yeah, data privacy sort of limiting the growth or limiting some sort of innovation in the banking sector.
Not really. What is meant by data privacy in your context?
So there's a lot of things which banks, have from a customer's perspective. They have a lot of information which they can use to personalize, do customize, user experience. Offer that the same way recommendations and all those things. The way Amazons and Flipkarts of the world do that with very little information. You guys have a lot more information. You sit on a lot more information from, earnings to everything, monthly expense, everything. Is it that the information, privacy of the information or the security of the information or data, is that a threat which is limiting these sort of innovations?
Let me answer that. See, there's nothing that stops us from a regulation perspective.
Not from the regulations perspective.
So
from
privacy of data is defined by two places, right? One is the laws that govern, and the other is the regulator who sits on that data. And actually in our sector, that's a very, very big part. So from a OneView perspective, technically, we get to see the data across all businesses, and there's nothing that stops us from creating products or understanding your life stages. But the issue that starts happening is we can't pitch those products to you till the time you give consent to us. So the whole industry has not reached, I think the industry is fast reaching that point because it's a complicated industry. I'm not just talking banks, I'm talking all of financial services. It's not an industry where the customer is direct to us often. Often the customer comes through intermediaries, right, through advisors or through distributors. So there are many customers in this chain. We have third-party customers and we have the end consumer. And everyone's interests need to be maintained. So often keeping those interests in mind, the end consumer does definitely suffer. I think where fintech helps is it allows the customer to come directly and engage. And when he comes directly and engage, it allows us to request for his consent. The moment that consent happens, I think the floodgates of innovation, excellent service, predictive analysis, reaching a point where we can customize products to you, predict what your life stage is, and customize products specifically to a single segment, which is you, is possible. I think you will see that in the next 24 months in a very, very big way. So at least in that sector, I'm very, very optimistic that fintech is going to bring tremendous revolution with regard to customer consent and analytics. So there'll be a lot of product innovation that will start.
Super. Do we have any more questions?
Any
or
more
is
questions?
Just
We
to
can take
follow-
one last question.
Yeah, just a follow-up question to this. Does that mean that that data can be exposed to other communities if there is no privacy threat?
You're not audible. Louder,
Hi.
please.
To
Sorry.
other communities, meaning outside the financial sector?
Yes, correct.
So this question is, can that data be exposed to other communities outside of your own?
So if you talk of exposing those data to other than the entity which is the BFSI, so today we need to share data with the regulator. Today we need to share the data with CICs. Today we need to share the data with FIONT. Obviously that is always required. But if you talk of sharing a data with another fintech, nothing, so that is not going to happen. And in terms of the previous question, whether any privacy laws stop us from, it is not so. Because today, bank is having a lot of data. It is based on trust. But believe me, today all consumers' data, rather from a bank, it is more on a social media. So social media data exposed is more than the banking data, which is in a secured environment and sort of vault sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. A huge round of applause for our panel.